بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is a really important topic, a topic that I'm really passionate about because I truly believe that it is an area that if we build upon, it shapes every other area of children's lives. And you see that positive impact, seep into other strengths and skills that they need as they grow into adulthood. And so a lot of the work that I do is, evaluating the mental and emotional obstacles, processes that come between a person and having a healthy relationship with their creator, and having a healthy relationship with themselves, having a healthy relationship with others, and also having a healthy coping method with the experiences that we go through in life. And so a lot of times, the way we think, the way we process and interpret and deal with our emotions can affect the way that we go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, can affect the way that we interact with ourselves. And so this is something to keep in mind when we're learning about emotional resilience, is essentially we are trying to build children to have a healthy relationship with those four areas: relationship with God, relationship with themselves, relationship with others, and a healthy relationship with the life experiences that they go through. So what do we want to achieve by building emotionally strong children is that, number one, we want them to have a stronger relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, and this is what differentiates Islamic psychology from other frameworks, so like Western psychology or other frameworks, is that the central point is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the ultimate goal, is that we want to, whether it's we're working on ourselves or we're helping our children improve themselves, the ultimate goal is that we want them to have a stronger and more fulfilling relationship with their creator. That is the purpose. And so that should be the goal that we should have in mind as we approach emotional resilience with our children. So first and foremost, it's having a stronger relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Second thing we want to achieve is a healthy relationship with self. Building emotional resilience in children can help them connect to their true self, help them have a better understanding of who they are, what their needs are, help them feel more grounded and firm in life. And that's really an important quality, to feel that trust and security within yourself. Okay. A healthy relationship with others, ability to self-soothe. We're going to get into this later. The ability to calm themselves from, when they go through emotional agitation, when they go through difficult emotions. This is a really important quality and skill that is essential for their healthy functioning in life. Healthy coping skills and higher emotional intelligence. And we're going to get into a few of these as we go further. So first, it's important to define what resilience is and what emotions are, because our skewed perception of both these concepts can affect the way that we understand, process, and teach our children to deal with emotions. So resilience is not the ability to not feel negative emotions through experiences. It's the ability to deal effectively with them, right? So we go through pleasant, unpleasant emotions throughout our lives constantly. We go through difficult experiences, easy experiences. And resilience is really about how do we adapt to these changes? How do we adapt to adversity? How do we adjust to the fluctuating changes in our life, right? And how do we effectively deal with them? Not how do I not feel this negative emotion, how do I get rid of it? No, it's how do I learn from it, process it, effectively deal with it so I can grow spiritually, mentally, emotionally, right? So this is what resilience is. It's the ability to basically bounce back. It's the ability to adapt. Some of the factors that contribute to resilience to keep in mind are positive, healthy, and close relationships with family, friends, loved ones. This is a really important thing that, trait that contributes to resilience in children as they get older. A healthy perception of oneself and one's strengths and weaknesses, and this is something that parents play a key role in introducing their children to themselves. Parents, children as they get older, they will parent themselves the way parents have parented them. Right? So they will learn to talk to themselves and treat themselves the way that they saw their parents talk to them and parent them. So even as they get older, when the parent's voice is maybe not as strong, the way that you taught them to approach themselves, by the way you approach them, the way you taught them, the way you raised them, that voice still carries with them. And so it's really important to keep that in mind as you're building, as you're raising your children, is that, the things you say to them, the way that you raise them, the way you teach them to view themselves, they will always carry that with them. The ability to manage difficult emotions, strong and healthy problem solving and communication skills, feeling trust and security within oneself, as we said earlier, ability to ask for help and resources. This is a key skill to teach our children to be able to not be afraid to ask for help, to not see that as a weakness, right? Not viewing oneself as a victim and viewing themselves as resilient. Coping with healthy ways as opposed to resorting to negative behaviors, things that are harmful, to deal with their emotions, to soothe themselves instead of going through healthy coping methods. Helping and serving others. And finding meaning through all experiences, even difficult ones. So that's resilience. Emotions it's very important for us to understand emotions because we tend to have a black and white view of emotions in our feel-good culture, where if an emotion is good, we accept it and we're happy about it, and if an emotion is bad, how can I get rid of it? And we halt and we stop, and we have this like black and white view of how we interact with each of these. And so it's important to remind ourselves and our children that emotions are, they're part of life. They're nothing to fear or hate, even the difficult ones, and that they come in and out of our life through the various experiences that we go through, and that they're important because we cannot really learn from our experiences without accepting the emotion that comes with it. It's part of the lesson. And so understanding emotions is really crucial for us to understand our test and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to teach us through every experience. And, in the West especially, there's this emphasis on the mind and, the rational brain. And so a lot of times we tend to diminish the importance of emotions, and we tend to devalue them, right? As if like, oh, they're just emotions, go with your logic, right? But both our rational mind and our emotional part of us are crucial for us to understand our experiences. We need both, and there's a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala equipped us with the ability to think and rationalize, but also the ability to experience, emotions and to feel. And so one thing that a growing research that's out there is about emotional intelligence, right? And that differentiates from, which is called EQ, right? And that differentiates from IQ, which is the intelligent quotient. The intelligent quotient, IQ, is what we know to be a measure of, how much information we can collect, understand, process, and really retain. And EQ it's often referred as the other kind of smart. And a lot of growing research out there is showing that EQ can actually be more vital than IQ. And they've done studies in different companies where they've seen how employees at the company employees in the company who had a higher IQ or higher EQ, emotional intelligence, were actually more successful than those who had a higher IQ. So here's something to kind of shift our thinking about intelligence, because it's not as narrow as just your IQ, right? There's more to what constitutes being smart and being intelligent. And so emotional intelligence is something to take into account. There's a lot of research out there about emotional intelligence and how to build it in our children. It's a very vital skill. And I think we have to really pay attention to it, and especially when it comes to raising our boys, because it seems that it may be easier, or maybe the way that we raise our girls, it's especially with society, that it's not really frowned upon for girls to feel and to express their emotions, but there are societal expectations for the way men should express their emotions. And so, if we raise our children with that mentality, then, sorry, one second. If we raise our children with that mentality, especially our boys, then we almost stifle their emotional growth. We stifle their ability to express, communicate their emotions, and also understand other people's emotions and have empathy for other people. And so this is a growing dilemma that we're seeing in, the boys that are now becoming adults, is that there is this lack of emotional intelligence, especially when they go into relationships and, having to have empathy and feel for the other person, There's this idea that women are the feelers and men aren't, and it's really more about understanding each other's emotions. And it's something to consider when we raise our voice, to help them also understand themselves and how they express their emotions and how they understand other people's emotions as well. So this is a type of intelligence we want to empower in our children. So the goal for emotions is that we want to learn from them. That's the goal that we should have in mind for ourselves when we experience emotions, and for our children, is that we want to learn from them. We should look at them as having messages for us, right? And so parents can help their children understand their emotions rather than simply get rid of it. And so it's natural for a parent to not want to see their child agitated, right? It's natural for a child to come to their parent and right away they want to fix the situation. But this consistent tendency to want to fix actually cripples their emotional growth, right? It cripples their ability to have emotional resilience later on in their life, because you're teaching them to basically come back to you whenever they need a fix, right? So, and when they go back out into the world and they're dealing with further things and more struggles, they come back to you for that fix. But you never really taught them something that they can keep internally, right? Something that they can harness and grow and nurture within themselves. And so it's good for us. It's good for parents to be there for their children, but and to want to make them feel better. But we can take a different approach in also empowering them while we are helping them feel better. So reducing the tendency to fix emotions right away and empowering children to understand themselves and their emotions. Teaching them to self-soothe. So this is a very important concept, because self-soothing is a skill that we need throughout our lives. And if we're always dependent on someone else to soothe our internal agitations, we are never going to really gain any internal strength, and we're not going to grow, because we're always dependent on that person, or it's not even just the person. It could be anything that a person externally goes to soothe themselves. So for some people, it's video games, right? For some people, unfortunately, they go to drugs, they go to risky behaviors, they go to all different sorts of things. Some people resort to food, some people resort to going to someone right away. So they don't really sit with their agitation. They don't know, they've never learned that skill. So they're always dependent on something outside of them to take care of that emotion. Get rid of it for me, please, and so... Yeah, and emotional eating is just one of the forms of many forms that people take to soothe their emotional distress. So they're all outlets, there's so many of them. Entertainment a lot of times is a way for people to self-soothe. So our reaction to every time a child comes to us with their emotional agitation, we have to look at it as an opportunity for their growth. When we are fortunate enough, first of all, it's an honor for a child to feel comfortable to come to an adult, a parent, a teacher, and be able to feel comfortable and express their emotions. And it really, that moment, that experience is really an amana, and we should look at it that way. It's a trust, and we have to almost really, reevaluate our intentions and make our focus about doing what's best for this child in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because a lot of times, say we're not in a good state, or we're not, we ourselves don't know how to deal with our own emotions, we can make it about us, right? I can't handle seeing this child feel the certain way, so I want to make sure he feels better right away, right? So it's really taking these moments as opportunities and looking at them as an amana, a trust from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so every time your child comes to you with an emotional agitation, as small or big as it is, they're all opportunities that you're really taking to teach them emotional resilience, strength, and intelligence. And so an opportunity to guide them in those moments, you're really trying to do 4 things. You're trying to guide them to do 4 things. Number 1, understanding what the emotion is. Help your child understand what the emotion is. We're going to get into these 4 a little bit further. Number two, accepting the emotion as it is. Too many times, what really causes more struggle is people's resistance to the emotion, right? So if we can teach ourselves, and if you notice, I'm always saying ourselves, because the best way that we could teach children is to model it within ourselves, right? If we ourselves have an unhealthy relationship with emotions and the way we resist, we don't process, we don't reflect, we don't try to see what we can learn from our own emotions, how are we supposed to model it and teach it to our children? So understanding what the emotion is and accepting it is very important. Accepting it, because when you accept something, it's not necessarily that you want it there. It's not necessarily that you think it's great. But you're accepting that this is my reality. This is it. I'm not going to fight it. This is my reality. This is what I'm feeling. This is my experience. I accept it. I accept both. And I accept the experience and I accept the emotion that comes with the experience. They both are vital for me to understand the entire experience, right? And to learn from it. So accepting the emotion as it is and teaching your child that it's okay. It's okay to accept this emotion, that there's nothing wrong with you for feeling a certain way. There's no shaming when it comes to emotions. And so we don't want to teach our children to apologize for how they feel, right? They can apologize for a bad behavior as a result of how they feel. Like, for example, if they feel a certain way and they go hit a kid, right? Yeah, you have to apologize for that. But we're not teaching them to apologize and feel shame for how they feel. Because if they can accept how they feel and learn how to understand what it is and learn from it, then they can actually empower them to react more positively and not engage in negative and poor behaviors, right? Which is the goal, is that it's thoughts, emotions, behaviors, right? And so number three, what caused the emotion? You're trying to figure out what was the trigger, what caused it. Number four, and how they themselves can cope with the emotion. So you're trying to empower their skills to reflect, to think, and to brainstorm with you about certain things that they can do to cope with this emotional agitation. So before we get into the steps to gaining emotional resilience, I just want to talk about two types of emotion. It's really important to understand. There's primary emotions and there's secondary emotions. And this is very important because emotions are complex and they're not as simple. That's why a lot of times we don't even know how we feel because there's just more than one emotion going on, right? So a primary emotion is the direct reaction to the experience. So an example that I put is, a child gets pushed by a bully during recess. They feel angry. That's the direct response to the reaction. That's their instinctive first response. Or feeling sad after receiving a bad grade. They received a bad grade, first response, they feel sad. Feeling sad after friends do not invite them to hang out with them. Initial reaction, sadness. So fear, anger, sadness, and happiness are usually primary emotions, although they can be secondary as well. So it's a very temporary type of emotion. It comes and goes with the experience. But what makes it more complex is the secondary emotion, which is, it comes after the primary emotion. And it's a reaction to the thoughts and feelings about the first emotion. Right? So, for example, they feel angry after being bullied by the kid, but then later on, now they feel humiliated, right? So it's the emotion on top of an emotion. They feel sad after their friends do not invite them, but deep down, later on, what essentially the secondary emotion is, it's that they feel rejection, right? So you're trying to kind of peel these layers when you're talking to your children, because the primary emotion, those are natural, instinctive reactions to experiences. We all experience them. But secondary emotions, this is where our personal responsibility comes in a lot, because it's the way we think about our experiences that often add on more emotions to the initial situation. Like, have you ever went through something where initially it was a simple emotion and you were upset about something, but then later on you felt even more upset and more upset and more upset, because why? Because you thought about it and now you interpret it a certain way, and that made you feel another negative emotion. So this is really important to understand, because when we're processing our children's emotions, we're trying to also understand how they thought about the experience, how they thought about themselves as a result of the experience, because these things compound more emotions on top. And if we can get them to focus, this is where their personal responsibility is, and then we get them to focus on that, we can empower them to actually be in control of their thoughts, think of better ways that they can think about experiences, remind them of verses in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in, when it comes to dealing with adversities, trauma, and the way we should think about our experiences. This is where we can come in and really help guide their process, so they're not compounding more emotional struggle on top of the initial emotional struggle. The way they think, the way we think about our own emotions, and the way and our experiences, and the way we teach our children to think about their emotions and their experiences, can help alleviate some of the struggles and prevent some further struggles that can actually, if they're consistent and if they're not controlled and regulated, they can actually turn into psychological issues and worse mental and emotional problems. So steps to helping our children gain emotional strength. The first is the ability to sit with emotional agitation without trying to fix it right away. And this is for both parents and children. We talked about it in terms of parents a little bit, where you're not right away, okay, let me get you some ice cream, or you wanna go watch a movie, because the parents just want their child to feel better. So trying to refrain from that, trying to be able for yourself to be comfortable with agitation. And I think in our society, we're not comfortable with agitation. We're a feel-good culture, so we want to feel good all the time, and we want others to feel good all the time. And if someone's feeling bad, be positive. That's our motto nowadays. But this is not realistic. It's strength and resilience comes from not always putting on a smile and being happy all the time. It's learning how to dive in and learn from the pain as well as learning from the happy experiences. And this is the thing that Islam always teaches us, is that it doesn't put one higher over the other, happy experiences or negative or difficult experiences. I don't even like saying negative, because they both have something to offer to us, right? The happy experiences and the difficult experiences, they're both from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they're both there to teach us and to help us learn about Him, ourselves, and the world that we live in. And so trying to stay away from labeling, good or bad. We're not here to label. We don't know, Allahu alam, where the khair is. We don't know where the goodness is in our experiences. So being able to sit with the emotional agitation as parents, but also being able to help your child not run away from the problem as well. So when, for them, it's to encourage them to not go play video games for hours when they're upset, or to not go eat, ice cream and junk food when they're upset. Things like that, can help them learn to self-soothe. It might be difficult in the beginning if that's what they're not used to, but it's something we need to teach them, the ability to sit with their pain. And sometimes what could help is that, we could ask them to, maybe if they can't talk about it, they could write about it, but simply just sitting with them is sometimes enough. Even if they don't want to talk about it, sitting with them, letting them cry it out, telling them they don't have to talk right now, that they could just cry, they could sit with you. But the goal is that you're not running away and you're not trying to give an easy fix to the situation. These are, again, opportunities for growth. Number 2, validate the emotion. So this is a really crucial step, because your reaction to your child's emotion is what will determine whether, number 1, he comes back to you to talk to you about further emotions and further difficult experiences, but also you're teaching them in that moment how to validate themselves and their emotions. And again, back to acceptance, that it's really important to learn how to accept our emotions as it is in its reality. So validating them, telling them that you understand why they might feel a certain way. You understand how painful that might be. But whatever you do, do not minimize the emotion. Do not compare yourself to your children. This is what you're concerned about. Do you know what I'm concerned about? Don't compare. The children have their own experience and should be viewed as their own unique creatures, And so it's really important to never minimize any of their experiences. And we have the best example of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who, the way he talked to children, he empowered them. Sometimes he sought their advice, making them feel important and valued, He never said, oh, you're just children, you stay here. He included them, he involved them so that they could feel valuable, part of society. And you see a lot of times in our society today, the adults are talking, don't talk, and so there's a children's place and there's an adult's place, and they can't feel empowered because they know it's not their place, right? So it's really important to go to the seerah and learn from the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I believe there's a series by Hisham Awadi, Children Around the Prophet. I believe that I heard a lot of good. I haven't heard it myself, but I heard a lot of good things about it. But so just going to the seerah and learning from the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, there's a really beautiful story where we can learn a lot about not minimizing our children's emotion. It was a story about a little boy who had lost his bird. And the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam sat for a long time with this child just because he lost his bird, to console him, to sit with him. In some narrations, I read that he made dua with him, So he took the time. I mean, there's no one with a more important job than the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? Way more important than any of our jobs, right? And so, but he took the time to validate this child, not over the loss of a human being, over the loss of his bird, because he knew that this child loved this bird. He saw this child play with this bird, right? And so he didn't minimize it. He didn't say, I have more important things to do. He sat with the child. He was able to sit with the emotional agitation of the child. He was able to console him. He valued him, made him feel important, made his emotional experience feel important. So it was just a reminder to myself and to you all to constantly go back to the prophetic tradition and see what we can learn from that. Number 3, asking the right questions. So this is really important because, and if you guys want to take a screenshot, a picture of these questions, these are just examples of questions that you might ask to get your child to start exploring and to think about what is going on with them. Because you're never, most likely, I've worked with children, so most likely you're not going to get a child who you're going to say, what's wrong? Oh, mom, I feel rejected right now. I feel humiliated, rejected, sad. My primary emotion is that I was angry. My secondary emotion is that I feel really, hurt. They're not going to say these things, right? So it's up to you to really, number one, what you're doing in this is that you're helping explore their emotions, but you're also empowering the concept of reflection, the skill within them. You're not going to always be available to them 24/7, and as they go into adulthood, if we do our job right as adults, teachers, and parents, is that they no longer need us to do the reflection, the self-soothing for them. And so that they are able to, reflect on their own and try to figure out what triggered me. I was feeling okay a few minutes ago. Now, why am I feeling upset now? What triggered it? What caused it? What can I do to make myself feel better? So these are some questions. What are you thinking right now? What was the hard part in that situation? What do you wish was different? Sometimes if you want to gauge their level of emotion, you ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, how worried, upset, angry are you? What can we do to help you feel better or make the situation better? Even though you want to make him feel better in this situation, you're still empowering him because you want to make him feel better, but you're asking him to figure out how, right? That's getting him or her to reflect on what do I need right now, right? So this will empower them to ask for help, ask for resources. Okay, mom, I might need some time alone right now. That would help me feel better. Okay, I might need to sit by myself, or whatever. They might tell you the things that they need. Is there anything you feel embarrassed or ashamed about? How often do you feel upset about this? Is this something that just happened, or was there a situation before that you were upset about this, felt the same emotion? Have you felt this way before? What do you wish other people understood about what you're feeling right now? And is there a dua that we can make together? This is really important. I leave the important things for last, so don't think because I didn't put it on top. This is actually one of the most important ones, and we'll get into this later. Is there a dua that we can make together? You're again back to our first goal, is that you want to strengthen their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you're trying to ask them, this is getting them to reflect on what dua to make. You're empowering their relationship in the way they communicate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you're just making, you're maximizing the spiritual potential of the situation. And what would you like to ask God for in this situation? Okay, maybe I can't help you right now, but okay, well, that's okay. There's going to be many times where I can't help you. But you know what? That's why we have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's the one who will always be there for you, and He loves you more than I love you, and He has mercy towards you more than I have mercy, and just directing them back to their Creator. And then would writing out your feelings help, or would talking to someone else help? Sometimes we want to be the ones to kind of be the heroes in the situation, but sometimes it's putting our egos aside and like thinking about what's best and saying, well, is there anyone else maybe you'd like to talk to, even though that might be hard for parents. But sometimes, especially in teenage years, a lot of children, they benefit more from talking to someone else, and so I see that to be a very common thing. So number 4, establish positive connections. So this has a lot to do with the social networks, who their friends are, teaching them about making positive friendships, what a positive friendship looks like, what does Islam say about positive friendships, your own social network as parents, the children of the friends that you hang out with. These are all very important things to consider, because you can learn a lot from they can learn a lot from you, but they can learn a lot from seeing other children, who are also positive examples, and from communities, and things that they can grow from. So establishing positive connections, empowering your child to help others. When children feel that they can help someone else, they are less likely to feel helpless over helping themselves. So, engaging them in volunteer work, even at a young age, is really important, because they feel important as they're helping other people, and they see, and not only that, you're teaching them to have empathy, right? This is a huge, a huge quality, because there's just something beautiful that happens when you are trying to serve Allah's creation, that Allah takes care of your own concerns and your own issues, and He reduces them because you're helping His creation, right? So He helps you. And so there's something powerful about that phenomenon, where you're teaching your child to think of other people. And there's a balance in terms of when we think of ourselves. Too much time spent on the self can cause even more problems, right? So you're getting them to have a balance between the time they think about themselves and their growth, and the time they think about other people, and so having that balance is important. It's not a me, myself, and I world, and this me, myself, and I mentality, especially in our society today, is what's causing a lot of problems. So like I was talking earlier about Islamic psychology, the end goal of Islamic psychology, even when you're trying to improve yourself and learn about yourself, the destination is not the self. The destination is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if the destination is the self, which is a lot of the Western methodology, is that when you are proving yourself to go to yourself, it actually can fire back and cause more problems, because you're not meant to be a destination. We were not equipped that way, and we do not possess everything that we need to thrive. We need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is an important concept. Number 6, be aware of what your child is exposed to. So taking a break from, the media, a lot of the news, video games, things that they're constantly absorbing. Being aware of how these things impact their emotional experience is very important. Number 7, model and teach self-care. So, teaching your children to give everything its right, and this is an Islamic concept, right? That the Rasul ﷺ taught us to give everything, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala His right, our family their right, our work its right. And so, teaching them to eat healthy, exercise, but above all, spiritual self-care, to take care of their souls, the most permanent part of who they are, right? When we talk about self-care, a lot of times, again, in our society, the dialogue out there is, self-care is like, you taking care of yourself physically, or you doing something fun for yourself. But self-care, first and foremost, at the forefront of our mind, is how do I take care of my soul, this most permanent part of me, right? Everything else is the temporary part of me. But you teach your child that that's the most permanent part of you, right? And what fuels that most permanent part of you is your heart, right? And so how do you take care of your heart? How have you taken care of your heart today, So self-care is teaching them to take care of this most truest and most permanent part of who they are. And this is, again, teaching them about the truth of who they are. So they know what their identity is. And so that's one. But also teaching them to give everything its right, the way they feel about themselves, what they're eating has an impact on their mental and emotional well-being. Taking time to take breaks and relax and even have fun. Like that's, some children are wired to like be perfectionists and work all the time. And, sometimes it's telling them to give, to even the children that aren't, just teaching them how to give everything its right and to how to balance these things. Number 8, help them develop a positive view of themselves and the world. So again, back to the way, I think I spoke about this a little bit earlier, just shaping the way that they view themselves by the way that you talk to them, by the way that you approach them about their mistakes, by the way that you teach them about who they are. They will learn about who they are in their early upbringing from teachers, parents, and adults, important figures in their lives. And the world, especially when they're hearing constantly negative things that are happening in the world, it's really important to, help them foster like this hopeful outlook. And a big part of that is, encouraging them to see, to have a positive opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their creator. And to remind them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I am what my servant thinks of me. So to kind of help connect their hearts more to God's promises, right? More than, the world, what the world is presenting to them every day. Because it can be very negative, and they're now, it's no longer, when I was younger, we didn't have, access to, we didn't have cell phones, in my generation, like when I was, middle school or even early high school. So, but nowadays children are exposed right away to all these things. And so, they might feel overwhelmed and they might feel like the world is a dark place and negative and they don't know how to process these things. It is our job to remind them to connect more to God's truths than to what they're hearing all the time. And we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran to be aware of shaitan promising you of poverty, right? And so poverty is a loss of anything. It's not just a loss of finances, it's a loss of security, a loss of wealth, it's a loss of sanity, it's a loss of emotional well-being, it's just a loss in general. And so while Allah reminds us of His hope and maghfirah and forgiveness and all of these things and the goodness in the world and His goodness and what He's willing to give us and all of these things that He promises us, Shaitan is always promising us poverty. And when you're exposed to all of this negativity 24/7, of course, Shaitan is going to use that against, use that to basically remind you that the world is, or to make you feel like the world is a bleak place, right, or a dark place. So it's really important that you're kind of addressing these skewed perceptions, that you're trying to remind them of Allah's hope and that. And finally, number 10, helping your child look at difficult experiences as learning opportunities. Every experience, whether difficult or happy, is an opportunity to learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's an opportunity to learn about myself, and it's an opportunity to learn about the world, right? It's a learning opportunity that teaching them to view themselves from the day they're born till the end of their life as students of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah is their ultimate teacher, and that it's Him and them, that they're always learning from, every experience that they go through. Which leaves me to probably the most important part of my presentation, which is emotional resilience and relationship with God. We need to teach our children that emotions are a pathway to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're a means to getting closer to Allah. And that, our goal, and our purpose in this world is to know Him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us so that we can experience knowing who He is, connecting with Him, and having a fulfilling relationship with Him. And emotions can be a means to understanding that, can be a means to going to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So teaching our children to take their emotions to Allah, right? And this is a great opportunity to teach your children about the 99 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One second. So, again, the goal and the purpose is to get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us 99 names, right? Because every one of our experiences direct us to a name of Allah, right? So when they are feeling weak, you can remind them to depend on Al-Qawi, right? The strong, the one who can give them strength, right? When they are feeling rejected by others and they're feeling unwanted by their friends, or you can remind them to go to take that emotion to Al-Wadud, the most loving, the most, the one who loves you more than anyone else, right? And so when they feel lost or confused, you can remind them to take that confusion to Al-Hadi, the one who guides, the one who gives guidance and clears our path for us. So, helping them, again, take their every experience, whether emotional one, whether it's difficult thoughts about things, whatever it is, you're helping them take it to get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine the reward that you get by directing your child to get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more. And this is an amana, as parents, as teachers, as caretakers, our responsibility is to direct them to Him, right? Not to direct them to ourselves, right? We're there to direct them to Him, and this is the most important trust and the most important responsibility. And so, this is also encouragement for us to learn about the 99 names so that we could know how to direct our children to them. And, allowing them to see that, every emotional experience and our tests is an opportunity that Allah is giving us to learn and to experience one of His names that maybe we have not experienced. One of the most beautiful things I learned about the story of Adam alayhi salam was that a lot of times when we think about the story of Adam and how he was, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put him on earth after he ate from the tree, is that we think of it as, that this is a punishment, right? We think of it as like Adam is being shunned, alayhi salam. But one of the most beautiful ways that I've learned to look at it is that this is out of Allah's love for Adam, that Adam alayhi salam, is that He wants him to experience Him on more than one level, right? Now being on earth and having made a mistake, now Adam alayhi salam can experience the beauty of At-Tawwab, right? Ar-Rahman, the one who, the most compassionate, the Al-Ghaffar, right? The one who forgives. He wouldn't have experienced that if he never made a mistake, right? And so, this is part of going through the different experiences in life, is that Allah is really opening the door for us to experience Him on different levels. And this is what we're here to teach our children, is that every experience, we have to kind of shift our lens and see, what name is Allah trying to point me to? What is He trying to teach me about Him, And not only do you learn about Him, but He opens the door for you to learn about yourself. And He, the more that, and this is where tazkiyah comes in, and I believe tazkiyah principles are so important, purification of the heart, because the more that we can, purify our heart, we can lift the veils between us and truth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts lifting the veils between our hearts and the ability to see reality as it is. Reality about Him, reality about ourselves, and reality about our experiences. Very importantly, self-care for parents. You can't give what you don't have. And that's why before I spoke about, if you yourself are not taking care of yourself emotionally and your child comes to you with some heavy emotions, you might just have the tendency to just get rid of it for him or her. You can't handle your own emotions. How are you going to handle theirs? And so it might be heavy for you. And so, self-care isn't a selfish thing. It's about self-preservation. You're really trying to take care of yourself so that you can give more. And it's not necessarily that you're not going to be able to give, but your potential to give is diminished, right? You're not going to be as present with your child as they're talking. You're not going to be able to give fully of who you are and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has possessed you with to give. And so, taking the time to practice everything that we just talked about giving to your child, you have to practice it with yourself, because we know that children learn more from what they see and witness rather than what is said to them. So if you're not nourished, it's definitely going to impact the way that you nourish them. And again, back to the point about spiritual self-care. Your spiritual self-care comes first, and then of course you have to take care of your mental, your physical, and your emotional. Finally, I want to leave you guys with one of my favorite poems by Rumi, where he talks about, it's called The Guest House, and it talks about, how to engage with emotional experiences. So I'm going to read it, and you guys could look it up, and I think it's honestly a great poem to share with your children. So it says, "This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows, who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing, and invite them all in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. This is such a beautiful poem, especially even for us to learn from and for us to teach our children. It's that emotions are not enemies, welcome them, embrace them, see what you have to learn from them. And don't be so afraid. A lot of times it's the fear of having an emotion that keeps people like tense and like not open to life and not, just not free, essentially, right? And so being open to whatever, in one day you can have a fluctuating emotion. You could be laughing 1 minute and then the next minute someone says something agitates you and then you move on a second later. Like emotions just come in and out of our lives, right? And so, teaching ourselves and our children to embrace them and be open to them just makes us more able to go with the flow in life and be able to learn from our Creator a little bit more. So that's all I have. Jazakumullah khair, and I'll take questions now, inshallah. Yes.
Thank you so much. That was an incredible presentation.
I think she has some. I guess. I can email some of it. Inshallah, yeah. Especially like the steps that you guys could take. Maybe I could put it on inshallah. Yeah, definitely.
Did you ask a question?
No, it's a side question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum
Thank
salam.
you so much, Marwa. You did an incredible job.
No,
I think it's
jazakallah khair.
probably one of the best presentations I've heard because I do believe emotional intelligence is extremely relevant. So my question for you is this. So obviously, parents, sometimes we have children that complain about the same things. And I noticed that you said give every emotion its importance and kind of like take it in. But when you have your child, for example, I'm just giving an example. I have one child that she'll always complain about like a person saying something to her over and over. I mean, she's a very sensitive child. So before I would always give her the time of sitting and listening to her emotions, but then I noticed I felt like somehow in a way, maybe I'm wrong, I was enabling her, like, because, so my message started becoming recently in the past year is like, unfortunately, Mama, people can be mean sometimes. You just have to know yourself and not believe what they say.
Yeah.
And I understand that you want to cry, but I just, how could I explain? Like, I get what you're saying, that you should give it importance, but sometimes my concern is that if you constantly sit there and baby that emotion in a way and sit there and give it its place like you're saying, which I do believe you're right, are you in a way sort of enabling them to kind of not be stronger, like making them weaker?
Well,
Does that make sense?
yeah, no, it does. Well, it's very important to understand that being there, we can be there for them in a way that doesn't enable them. So the enabling was when I was talking about, giving them that fix. Like she comes to you with a problem, you tell her, you should feel this, you should not do this, or you should, what you were saying, like you telling her like, that's just them, you're explaining to her the situation, you're interpreting the situation for her, right? So she goes back, okay, she understands you in the moment and she agrees with you, but then she goes back and she has another difficult experience. Then she comes back. Then you say, well, you remember I told you, like, children sometimes can be mean, and you say the same thing, right? But what we want to do in those situations is that we want to empower them to come up with an interpretation for themselves instead of you giving them the interpretation, right? So it's totally cool to do that from time to time. Sometimes they need that. But maybe in those moments, you could direct the question back at her.
Well, I didn't used to explain it. Before it was, okay, let's talk to the teacher, let's have a meeting with the child, let's do this. But it just became then where I was like, okay, maybe I'm wrong, because now she's complaining like 4 times a week, whether it's about her brother or her cousin, or the student in class.
But how did she start reacting after you started like giving her that explanation?
Well, I don't know if I improved it at all. I don't.
Okay.
I feel guilty now when I'm hearing it, because I used to sit there here and sit with her and And she'll tell me how she feels, and it's like the same situation. A child or someone will say
Yeah.
something to her, it hurts her feelings.
Yeah.
And I totally understand it's relevant, but she'll react like in a way
Yeah.
where she's crying. And even
Yeah.
the school will tell me your child is very sensitive.
Yeah.
So then I felt that I created her that way.
Yeah.
In a way, because I always took her and coddled her and said, okay, let's do this and let's do that. So then I started feeling like, okay, maybe I just need to tell her how life is. And this is how life is sometimes, that I've gone through that at
Yeah.
work and in all the things that I do. People will say things that are mean to me.
Yeah.
And it hurts. It
Yeah.
does. But sometimes you kind of just go rise above that.
Right.
So my question to you is, I mean, am I wrong in doing that? Because I didn't used to do it that way.
Well, so what you're doing now, I don't see, you're explaining to her the reality of life, right? And you're still being there for her. You're not minimizing what she's going through, but now you're trying to take steps to explain to her. You're almost teaching her how to accept the reality of life, is that sometimes people will be mean, but the one thing that you can control is you and your internal experience. So I don't think right now you're doing anything necessarily wrong, but I would encourage you to throw back the responsibility on her so that she can kind of start to explore what she can do to help her feel better. So even in those situations, you can sit there and validate her, right? Without making it seem that, without like trying to enable. So in a way where you can say, well, let's see, this happened before, right? What do you think might help you feel better in this situation? Other than, of course, going to like shopping or, something that like, yeah, just an example, yeah, but like, like an example, like asking her, what can you do right now to make you feel better? How do you think you can respond to this situation differently in a way that can make you feel stronger? Maybe what can, like, first of all, how do their comments make you feel about yourself? So she might say, well, I might feel really bad. They make me feel rejected. They make me feel like I'm not pretty like them. They make me feel like, something like, I'm just giving examples, yeah. But like, and then you say, well, do you think, do you believe it to be true because they said it? And you could explore that emotion. You're sitting with her, you're giving her the time, but you're taking that time to go deeper, because it's never, her feeling hurt by them is the primary emotion. Then there's the secondary emotion, rejection, humiliated, not feeling unwanted, or feeling that she's not like the other girls, or being compared, all the things that girls go through and children go through. How old is she?
She's 8 years old.
She's 8. Oh, okay. So even, nowadays, it's the wild out there, right? Like, I worked in elementary and middle school, and children can be vicious nowadays. Like, there's cliques in 3rd grade. It's like, but yeah,
And the thing with her, she's extremely emotionally mature. That emotional maturity, she is, all the teachers since she was little.
That's
that
good.
emotional maturity is the lack of understanding that everyone else is not as mature. So she's very sensitive to how she approaches people, how she talks to people, how she does things. So I see her sometimes where she's like, well, I'm so kind. I always help everybody. Why is it like this?
Yeah.
You know that's life.
Yeah.
That's the world that we live in, unfortunately.
And it's good for you to let her see her sensitivity as a strength, not as a weakness. Our society teaches us to view sensitivity. You got to be tougher. You got to be stronger. Don't be so sensitive, right? But you just said that she's emotionally mature. So sometimes sensitivity comes with emotional matureness. Is that because they're attuned to emotion, they understand emotions, and they understand how people react, they can be sensitive to them, right? So it's actually, it can be a strength, and it's your job is to help her harness that, just so she can use it positively and not be so defeated, But I would encourage you to still validate her, to still sit with her, but use that time and throw back the questions at her, right? So instead of her coming to you and you saying, well, this is how children are, this is what you should do, now is the time. So use that sometimes, but other times you could say, well, what do you think you're really feeling? Like, what is going on? How do they really make you feel? And she's emotionally mature. I think she'd be able to, you can empower that sense of reflection for her more easily. So I don't know if that helped, but yeah, no problem. Anybody else?
Yeah,
Yes.
is it?
Sorry. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Okay, so when children are very agitated, many times, like in other parenting talks or books, I've read that it's best not to approach the situation in that current state of agitation. So I noticed that some of my children, they'll go and they might read a book, or I just feel like that's not the time for them to have a meaningful and productive conversation about their emotions. They're just so upset about whatever's going on. So is that something that's incorrect for them, that You know, are they self-soothing through a wrong means? Like if she, like one of my daughter will go and she'll, you know, she'll just read a book and she'll come back and she'll be in a much better place where she was before. So does that mean that I need to, at that point or at a calmer point, go back to what happened and address it? Or is was that enough for her to like kind of come back to the same situation and deal with it in a better way?
I think that it's good to give children the time for themselves to kind of sit with themselves. It's not always beneficial to approach and want to talk about it when they're emotionally agitated, because you know, you won't be talking to their hearts, you're going to be talking to their egos, because they're very like agitated and they're in a state of distress. So you have to calm the person down before you're able to. And if they need that time to go read or, you know, sit with themselves a little bit, that's totally okay. But yeah, I would definitely encourage you to address it later. Not in a way where you're forcing them to talk, but, you know, you could just say like, okay, so do you want to talk about what happened before, you know, or, you know, and if they don't want to, be like, I'm here, I think we should talk about it, and I'm here when you are ready to talk about it, because, you know, just in case it happens again, you know, I want you to feel better the next time if it does happen, or, you know, kind of let her know that it's, you know, ignoring a situation doesn't always, you know, help them learn the skills they need to deal with it when it happens again, right? And, you know, if she consistently uses being alone or like going to read or to video games or whatever to every time she has a problem, that's going to be her mode. So she's never going to really learn how to process. So you have to look at every child uniquely. If that's their consistent form of behavior, you kind of want them to learn new behaviors. You kind of want them to learn how to talk about things and not always to just shove their feelings, you know, into something else, you know. So
what would be an effective way of cooling down in the long term? I mean,
of what?
What would be an effective way of cooling down in the long term? I mean,
no, that's okay. That's okay. Reading is fine. You know, I'm just saying like, I'm just saying if it's a pattern of behavior for her to like never want to talk and just always want to be in her room, or, you know, seclude, or, you know what I mean? Like if she needs a little bit time, give her that space, but remind her that, you know, after she's done getting space, we should talk about it, because it's important, you know, that it's important for her to understand what's going on with herself and her emotions and things like that. So yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
So I have a 7 years old, almost 8, and sometimes I feel that there's a situation where he should feel sad or maybe resentful, and he doesn't. He's okay. And I feel like it's not just my reflection. I think that's like human nature. He should feel sad now, and he's not. So how do I deal with that? No, should I just tell him? I'm not sure if he's just like letting it inside or he's not feeling it at all. He doesn't speak about it. He acts fine, and it just confuses me.
So with this, it's hard because I would need like specific examples, you know, because some children, the way we respond to certain things might not be the way that we expect children to respond.
Okay, so for example, his cousin who he lived with like for 7 or 8 years, he left. And it was like, it was a traumatic experience for all the cousins. And he was like, okay, well, you know. And he was like,
he's so resilient.
They're like best friends. And he didn't, so he was like crying, and it was like, he took his cousin. And he was like, okay, we'll just like FaceTime.
Bye, I'll see you later.
Visit. Yeah. He's kind of like that.
You know, I guess this is a hard question because everyone experiences emotions at like different stages, and it could be that maybe he still hasn't reached that stage. I'm not sure. But maybe have you tried asking him like how he felt about his cousin? And
like, we can always visit. We will, you know.
He's very rational. That could just be his trait, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't experience emotions. Maybe, you know, personality also plays a role. I mean, every child reacts differently. Does he go and he plays with his toys after, or what is he like? Does he seclude and spend time alone, or maybe he feels more connected to you guys than to his cousin? Maybe he feels like he didn't lose any type of security. I mean, you know, again, it's a friendship relationship at this point. Maybe, I'm not sure honestly, but I would say give it time, maybe.
Assalamu
alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
I think my son is kind of the opposite of what she said.
Of the opposite. See, everybody, subhanAllah, like that's the beauty of like children. Their personalities are shaped at such a young age, you
Yeah,
know.
so my older son is 4 years old, and he's very, very attached to me. Like, he does not want to leave me at all whatsoever. Like, when we go to the masjid, I would tell him to go with his dad to the men's side. He doesn't want to go to the men's side. He wants to be with me. If we go anywhere outside, he's always with me. Like today, when I wanted to drop him in a preschool upstairs, he was crying. Like, he would like cry hysterically. I got scared that something actually is gonna happen to him.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I caused that myself from being overprotective. Like, I don't know. Is it something that I did, or it's his personality, and I don't know how to deal with it? Because he's old now. He's 4, and he just doesn't want to go and play. And if somebody come and ask him, "What's your name?" You know, he doesn't. He stays quiet and he holds my hands. Like, he doesn't want to. You know what I mean? Like, he's very attached to me. Not even with his. He doesn't even want to go with his dad, with his grandma. Just me, and that's it.
I mean,
I want him to be independent. I want him to, I'm not gonna be there for him all his life.
Yeah.
It kind of feel good for me,
Yeah.
But I want him to be independent, and I'm not sure how to approach that. I don't want him. Like, one time I told him, I don't know, it was bad from my side. I told him, being shy is only for girls, which
No.
I was like, I don't know
It's
how to
okay.
deal with it, I know, like.
This is emotional resilience,
Yeah,
no,
I know.
number
Like,
one.
I wanted to break that, and then I didn't know how to do it. I was just like, Abdurrahman, you're a boy. You have to be, you shouldn't be shy. You should be strong. And then he was like, Mom, but you're a girl. How come you're not shy? And then I was shocked. Like, I didn't know what to say.
That's so good. He's 4 and he said
4.
that?
Mashallah, he's very, very, he's very bright. He knows how to talk and express himself. And then he shot me up. Like, I didn't know what to say. I was like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, you don't compare boys and girls. He's teaching you that.
I don't know,
I mean, my specialization isn't really early childhood, but I can say that I've seen, children attach differently. There's different attachment styles, right, in which children attach to their parental figures. And so some of them are more attached to one figure than the other. But that's not necessarily going to be the case forever, That's just the way that's their attachment style. That's the way that they have attached to you. And it might change when he starts going and, into school. They didn't start school yet, right?
Well, I actually we put him in school for this year, just to break that, attachment.
And how'd it go?
He's been in school for almost a year now. Every single morning when I drop him off, he cries hysterically. And the teacher has to, take him away from me. It just is too much. I mean.
Yeah, I don't think there's really, maybe you can look up certain skills or things that you could do with children who are overly attached, but I have seen a lot of children grow out of that. I mean, it's not something that's permanent or anything like that. It's just the attachment style, but again, it's not really my specialization, early childhood. Yeah, so
you
I'm sorry.
think 4 is not, he's 4, he's not old enough to, let go of me?
Yeah, he's really still pretty young, so yeah. If he's doing this at 20, I think we have bigger problems. But I think I'm not minimizing it at all either. You could look into that and see maybe there's certain skills that you could do with him, certain exercises or things like that. But I'm not too concerned. I think he'll be okay. Yeah, inshallah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Oh, I don't know who was first. Oh.
So my daughter's also 4, and she's very similar in that. And I think when I just sort of accepted, and I took it as a compliment that she wanted to stay with me, that I realized that she was starting to then venture out and do her own thing. So she wanted to stay with me and said, sure, come with me. You want to come with me to the program? Sure, you just have to sit quietly though. Know that you have to be very quiet, otherwise you don't play with the kids or you stay here. So when I started doing that more recently, she has been able to separate herself a little bit more. But when you try to force it upon them, it's like a pushback from them. They're like, why are you trying to push me away? So let sort of accept part of that has helped me. I don't know if that's going to be the same way for you, but that has helped me a lot.
That's great advice, actually. That's great feedback. They could be experiencing a certain way when they see that you want them to be away from you. They get worried and anxiety comes up for them. So that's Jazakallah khair. That's really great. So, okay, and I think you had a question?
Sorry.
Or she has a question.
Assalamu alaikum. So I actually have 2 questions. One is that I have a 7-year-old, and I know that she's always been a very sensitive child. But I feel like the hard part with her is that she goes from one emotion to the next way too quickly. And her level, like the of emotion is so strong that it's like one small thing and it's tears, it's waterworks, it's really bad. Or when she's angry, she's really, really angry. So that is one question of mine, like if that's a concern or if that's kind of normal or how to handle that. And then second, I have 3 kids, mashallah, and all 3 have completely different personalities. So the struggle that I find is when they do the same thing, but I have to treat them differently, like deal with the situation differently.
Yeah.
But with her, she's too young. But the other 2, they're 7 and 5. I'll always hear, well, you did this with Yusuf, or you did this with, you know, Ozzy, or whatever. Like I feel like then there's a discrepancy, and then they have issues with that.
Yeah.
So 2 questions.
So the first one, I think with the 7-year-old who's fluctuating emotions, I think she's struggling with self-soothing. So she's very external things have a huge impact on her. So she goes through something and she might be programmed to be just very sensitive, more sensitive than your other children. So she feels things more deeply. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just, you're with her, you are going to might have to do extra work with her on teaching her how to self-soothe. So empowering her sense of thinking about what her emotions are. You know, sometimes they feel things so intensely because they don't really know what they're feeling and they don't know how to deal with it. And so with her, especially because she's really sensitive, you're going to have to spend time with her, helping her explore her emotions so that she's not going up and down just by anything around her that always happens. You want to connect her less to the environment and more to her internal self. And so, you know, helping her maybe do some writing. A lot of writing really helps children and even adults who are highly sensitive to emotion, because it helps them. There's a lot of thoughts going on and there's a lot of feelings, and writing it down kind of like is a release for that, you know. Does she talk to you about it when she goes through? She does. See, wow. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, and it's also, it is, yeah, and also it's such an early age too. So it's, you know, still give her time to kind of learn about herself and her emotions. I mean, she's just going with whatever emotional experience she's going through. But I would, like, you know, monitor that closely and see how, you know, it translates as she gets older. But it's good, yeah. So as she matures, I can imagine it will get better as she starts to understand herself. But for her being sensitive, I can see how she might go from one emotion to the next. So, yeah. And did you have to comment on that one? Okay, you did? Oh, you can comment.
Yeah, I wanted to say this. Have you ever seen the movie Feelings? There's this movie called Feelings or Emotions. The one with the
Oh, with the children, yeah,
For me, I
yeah.
thought that was a brilliant movie.
Oh, In and Out, yes, that's the one. I still haven't watched that. I should watch it. Yeah,
But I remember I watched it with my kids and I actually bought the movie because
yeah,
it really shows you how emotions develop, how one emotion takes over at some point in your life.
yeah,
And throughout your life and throughout your experiences, then there's one emotion that kind of has a little bit of all of those
yeah,
emotions and levels you out. And I feel like that's what it's like.
yeah,
Because all our kids are different. And different emotions dominate.
yeah, definitely.
Some children, like your child, might have all these different feelings. So she'll probably be a very expressive person and will be extremely a great speaker probably because she is like that. But I think just because I have 3 different children, I'm a psychologist myself.
Oh,
And
great.
I see that, so then I'm like, okay, that's what it is. So I thought that movie was brilliant, like for parents. I thought even just for parents, because to understand ourselves, understand our children, because emotions develop. It's like when you walk, we don't walk, we learn to walk better as we grow, right? So I feel like emotions
Yeah.
sort of are the same.
No, definitely. I think In and Out it's a great movie for children to watch, and like, cause they Inside Out, yeah, In and Out. That's the burger place. Yeah. So, sorry, I'm going off Inside Out. But what I did want to, where is she in her place in your children? Middle child. She's the oldest. Okay. So. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was like, no, you don't expect me.
Yeah.
Always work. She goes to school. He goes all the time. He's not in school yet. But so I feel bad that he's very low maintenance. He doesn't give me that
Well,
emotional.
because she's the oldest child, it was just you and her, right? So like she didn't have an older sibling, so she became dependent upon you to kind of go to you for every emotion, So she feels that comfort. Whereas like sometimes middle children, they have another child above them, and so they might not feel always that direct, communication. So it's important to take into account where they fall into their place as children. So yeah. And we have one up there, and I don't know who's first, so
Yes,
I want to be fair.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
I have young children, 4 and younger, and I'm kind of a calm person, used to be, kind of. So my question would be, I feel my kids don't take me that seriously, especially if I'm like telling them to do something or just to put their shoes on or, just the regular stuff. I keep changing my way a lot during the day. I don't know if that's going to confuse them or not. I mean,
What do you mean changing your way?
my style of, saying stuff, because I feel myself I'm clueless because they're not listening, or sometimes they don't want to listen. So you keep, changing your methods, your way, you're saying it some way, and then somehow, you're shouting, and
Yeah.
I feel it confuses them a little, but
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah. I mean,
how is that going to impact them,
I mean, it's important to understand that you are going to evolve as parents, and that changing in your style is a natural thing that's going to happen. But in one day, you might want to take a little bit look at that, because it might show them that when you tell them like that what's it called? That sense of stability, or that sense that you're going to follow through on your what you say. They might, like, for example, if you tell them there's going to be a consequence if you do this, right? So you said they're not really responding well to, you being assertive with them. And that might be because maybe you've said, well, this is a consequence, and then maybe you decided to not give them the consequence. Children are very smart. They're going to realize, well, she fell back on her consequence, so I'm not going to, so she's probably not going to do it anyway. So I think staying true to our word as adults and caretakers and teachers and parents is really important, because children will pick up on the fact that you're not true to like what you say, and that and they'll realize that they think they can have an upper hand, and so it's important to be consistent with what you're saying to them. Yeah, I mean,
I tend to sometimes tell myself to just calm down. Don't be that
so yeah, I think what you're afraid of is being aggressive. So you think of the spectrum. There's aggressiveness, there's passiveness, and there's in the middle, it's called assertiveness. This is where we want to be, right? There's different types of parenting styles. There's authoritarian, which is one of the worst, where it's like high levels of being strict and control and demands, and low affection, right? And then there is permissive, where it's high affection and high, like love and like giving and stuff, and then very low control and assertiveness and structure, basically. There's a few other ones, but the one that the goal is to be authoritative, which is both they're high in control, assertiveness, and demand. I don't want to say demand, structure, right? And also high in affection and love and giving and compassion and all of that. And there is a way to do both, and it does come with having a balance of being able to give affection, but also be firm, right? So teaching them that just because I'm strict with you doesn't mean my love for you is gone or anything like that. And this is really important, because I think a lot of times when we feel like we have to be strict, it's in the absence of, the child might think it's in the absence of love, right? And we think of the same thing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? We think that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we fear Him, that it's in the absence of love, right? But in essence, we know that everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to do or forbade us from doing, its foundation is that He loves us, right? And so, and that He knows that, like for example, salah, right? When we miss prayer, the consequence is so high. And I think, why is the consequence? How can Allah love us if the consequence is so high, right? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what we need even when we don't know what we need. So in the times that we don't come out of love for Him and out of hope for His reward, we can still come out of fear of the consequence. But at the end of the day, what is the goal that Allah has, is that He wants us to still come and get what we need even when we forget that we need it, right? So again, the foundation is love. It's the same thing with parents. Allah's love is greater to a child than more than the mother, right, to her child. So you being firm in that, and explaining to them, the reason I'm doing this is because I love you, right? And, and know that even if they don't see it, they might see it in the long run. There's a lot of things we go through experiences, and sometimes we get upset, right? We don't know what Allah's doing for us behind the veils. We don't know what Allah's, and some people, they get upset. They get upset with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They think that Allah hates them. They think that Allah, but in essence, in time, they start to realize, oh my God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved me. So you have to be okay with your child being upset with you in the moment. And I think and it's very hard. Let alone with our children, a lot of us are not okay with another human being being upset with us, right? So we have trouble putting boundaries. We have trouble saying no. We have, but with our children, you have to be able to kind of work really hard on that, because you know that they're an amana for you, and that you're not there to be like 24/7. You're there to be the best mother to them, think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's there to do what's best for us, right? And that's the most important thing. You know what I mean? And so you have to keep that in mind, that you're not going to be liked all the time. You'll be loved, but not all the time liked. No problem. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-mm. Mm-hmm. 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 And their ego comes up. Yeah. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 That's beautiful. Mm-hmm. 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 That's really beautiful, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is it okay? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think one of the worst things we can do when we're addressing a child's mistake is making them attacking who they are instead of the action. It's like almost the concept of, even with adults, it's the concept of hate the sin, not the sinner, right? So, and what you're doing essentially is that you're comforting them with your love in the beginning. You're reminding them, you're shifting their focus to the action, and then at the end, reminding them again that you're there for them to help them correct the action. So, and we look at the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, most of the time when he talks about his punishment, he also talks about his forgiveness, right? So like we can learn a lot by the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks to us, and we could try to model that with our children, because one of the worst feelings is not feeling loved as children, and they carry that into their adulthood, and so it's important to monitor your own emotions, because what happens is you become angry that your child did something, and one, you take it as, oh, this is a reflection of me, bad parenting, or this is, they're not listening to me, or they're not, so what happens is your ego comes up, so you want to feel better, so you attack them for, and so it's important. That's why, like, you taking care of yourself and you being reflective and aware and doing muhasabah with yourself, accountability, will help you, address their actions and empower them to now actually think like he did, think to himself and say, what can I do to fix the situation? Because it's not that I'm flawed or that I'm a bad person or that, that I'm a human, I made a mistake, and now how can I fix it? And I have my mom's support, So that's a great way to do that. I think, she has. Oh, you're up there now, Iman?
Assalamu alaikum. I have two questions. The first one is, what's the youngest age we can teach our children to self-soothe? And then the second question is, how can we love our children unconditionally, yet at the same time not spoil them?
The first question, I don't have a direct answer for you, because I guess it depends on every child. I wouldn't leave your infant crying and expect them to self-soothe, because there's a thing out there about but research about leaving your child to cry and that will help them. But there's other research that comes out and says leaving them prolonged crying can actually harm them later on. So I don't want to talk about infancy, but even in early childhood, I mean, you could start talking to them, and I don't think it's ever really too early to start. You could start talking to them once you feel like they can understand you, that you can start talking to them about what they're feeling or what can they do to feel better and things like that. But it really depends on every child. And then your second question?
How can we love our children unconditionally and not help them to be spoiled? Yeah, not spoil them.
I think the essence of true love is that you want to do what's best for the person, even if they don't understand that that's best for them, right? So loving, and this is again, remember the permissive parenting style, is that which is high affection and then low structure and they found that those children struggle a lot in life, right? Because their parents wanted to be focused just on affection and loving and allowing them to do what they want because they thought that was good parenting. But eventually these children didn't learn how to set boundaries. They had poor grades later on in life, so they showed. And then the authoritative ones, the ones who had the balance of high affection and high structure and where parents were able to balance both, where they were able to put their foot down, be assertive while reminding their children they still love them, these are the kids who actually turned out to be more successful. They had better grades, they were more competent, they felt more secure in themselves emotionally. And so it's really about drawing a balance. Always keep these two in mind. It's how can I be assertive and how can I be loving? And that love can come with me being assertive. Love can come with me being upset with you, and teaching them that me being upset and me loving you is not the opposite. They're not opposites. They both go hand. Love is the foundation, and that from it is hope for reward and benefit, fear of consequences, right? So love doesn't shift, it doesn't change, it's always there. But there are times my love is going to make me put a consequence for you. There are times my love is going to make me give you a reward, but my love has never moved. So it's reminding them of these concepts.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
So I have two questions, but I'll separate them this
Okay.
time. So the first question is more about us.
Okay.
So this, as you described, this is a journey of self-improvement for us first.
Yeah, of course.
And we don't, the way we were parented may not have been aligned with this.
Yes.
And our parents are now wherever they are.
Yeah.
So what about our journey? How do we
Yeah.
help ourselves? Because this is quite a journey for us.
Yeah.
And yet, day by day, we're impacting our kids.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for us?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question because I think that many parents have not even begun to analyze their own upbringing and their own reflect on how they were brought up, and subconsciously they're just kind of continuing that cycle, right? And so it takes a lot of work, and not a lot of people are willing to put in that work, because it requires that you are open to the pain before actually feeling comfort and sakina and tranquility with yourself. And I think it's really important, because it's true. I mean, parents in all generations have made mistakes, and but yeah, like a lot of our parents in our generation, in our parents' generation, have not been, maybe accustomed or introduced to concepts like this. And so it's almost like you're going to have to peel away the layers that don't work for you while adding on layers that do, And so that's why, like, I think self-accountability and muhasaba, and you constantly reflecting on what is coming from me, what is coming from my own parenting, my own upbringing. Is this my issue, or is this really about my child? So this is like, for example, like I said before, parents sometimes they think they're disciplining their child, but it really was about suppressing satisfying their own anger, right? It wasn't about discipline, because it wasn't really about the child. It was about this anger building up in you that you had to get rid of, and you used the child to get rid of the anger. And this is unfortunately a really horrible thing, right? So it's about being honest with yourself. You're not going to be able to undo everything, and that's a big task. You're not going to be able to like correct every single mistake, but at least being honest with ourselves, and even our children. Parents who are able to be vulnerable with their child and say, I think I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Like, I made that mistake, and I thought I was doing the right thing, but I realized I wasn't. Like, believe it or not, like, you're never going to get to a point where you're a perfect parent. You have to be able to be vulnerable. And I think as adults, especially the way we're programmed to be parents, a lot of times we think vulnerability is a sign of weakness. I mean, I always use my own example. My mother was always like vulnerable with me. Like, she used to talk to me about her problems sometimes, and like, and I remember that making me feel that like she trusted me, and that, and that sometimes she would tell me like I made a mistake, and that never made me lose respect for her. That she's the person I respect most in this world, and she just reminded me how vulnerability can do that. So being open to vulnerability, like, just because you committed to a word, if later you realize that word was wrong, go back and correct it. Maybe that's something that parents in our parent generation didn't do, is that, well, deal with it, or like, but learning to be vulnerable and open, and realizing that just because you're a parent, you're not perfect, and you're not going to be, and that you're working on your own issues, and that way your child can recognize that and work on their issues with you,
Any books you recommend? Because sometimes you can't even discern the feeling that I did something wrong or not.
Yeah. Well, you mean for your...
Yeah, for myself. Yeah.
There's, I really like there's a book called Self-Compassion by Kristen, forgot her last name. But I can maybe send it to Iman later, and she can she'll send you a lot of the information on the slide. But I think self-compassion is really important, because she talks about the importance of, how you are with yourself and the relationship. And we're not really taught in our upbringing to maybe, like, the concept of self-love and self-compassion is not taught. It's almost like self-love, you're going to love yourself, like, go love someone else, you're being selfish right now, right? But honestly, like, if we can understand that, like, everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us with love, right? And that, like, when we learn about the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you learn how to practice them with other people, but you're never taught to practice them with yourself. You're taught to practice them with Allah's creation. But we're His creation too. And how can you really give something you don't know how to experience it? So when you practice, like, God's attributes, learn to feel, when you think of His mercy, think of how He's merciful towards you, think of how He's loving towards you. Nourish yourself, feel that you're loved by your Creator. This will make you feel more secure within yourself. Being more secure within ourselves allows us to teach others, to freely give, and to teach. But if you're not in a place where you're secure with yourself, you're gonna basically use children, your friends, your family in a way to kind of fulfill that security, to make you feel better about who you are, But if you can work with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to feel more secure as individuals and more loving and more compassionate towards yourself, you just feel happier, and you feel more room to, like, make mistakes, you feel more room to give, and and it's... So Self-Compassion, I felt, was a great book, because she talks about ways in which, we are harsh to ourselves, we're critical to ourselves, and how that puts a wall between us and other people. And so I think it's really important. And just any book about how you can be more self-aware. I have a bunch of, I'm not good with like thinking of titles on hand, but I will think of them and I'll email them to Ayman.
The second, hopefully small
Third.
question, yeah. It's about, so I'm a big fan of the consequence sort of model, teaching kids about consequences. But where do you draw the line between consequences and punishment? Because even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's consequences and there will be punishment. But there's a lot of parenting books that talk about don't punish the kids and you know, just talk to them. And,
Right.
But I don't know, what's your philosophy around that?
Well, a consequence can be a punishment, but I think when we think of punishment, we think of like, you know, the harsh, extreme, you know, but it could be, even in psychology, a punishment is anything, a reward is anything that you give to the child to increase the likelihood of that behavior. So a child does something good, you give him a reward because you want him to do that good behavior again. A punishment is anything that you give to the child to decrease the likelihood that they will do that again. So a punishment could be taking away something. That's a punishment, you know. We think it's not a big deal for children, but it is, you know, taking away something, depriving them of certain privileges, giving them the time to earn certain privileges. You know, these are things like seeing what's really important to them and telling them, well, listen, like you wanted this thing, I'm not going to give it to you. These punishment doesn't have to be this, you know, the harsh way that we think of it. It can have such an effect, you know, if we do it the right way, and also not just giving them the punishment, but speaking to them about why they're getting the punishment. So a lot of times we say, you did something wrong, okay, here. And children don't necessarily think the way we do, right? So all they see is, okay, I don't even understand what I did wrong, right? Like they might know that you're upset. See, there's a difference. Like they know you're upset about something they did, right? But they don't know that what they did is wrong and why. There's a difference. Just because you show them, you did that, I'm upset with you, that's wrong, okay? You're upset. They only know it's because my mom's upset or my dad's upset, but they don't actually understand why you think that action is wrong. So the talking and the consequence have to go hand in hand. And the reason sometimes they're not effective is because we give the consequence, no explanation, we just expect them to understand that what they did was wrong because I'm mad, but that's it, right? You have to sit with them and say, ask them, do you know why I'm upset? Do you know what was wrong about your action? Then they can explain to you and they'll be like, because you're upset. That's why it's, you know, no, that's not why. I'm upset because actually what you did is of harm to you. And this is why it's harm to you. And you could remind them of things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. You could remind them, give them, like we as adults, if someone just came and said to you, that's wrong, we're gonna be like, why? You know, when I was young, my parents used to say no to me. I used to be like, what do you mean no? They used to hate this, right? And it's not that I didn't accept the no. I would say, no, I accept your no. I'm not arguing the no. I just want to know why you're saying no. And when they said why, like it helped me feel better, you know? But so like, it's about giving them that understanding that like, you know, giving them that validation. Like think of yourself. If someone just told you that's wrong, that's haram. We hate that. Why is it haram? Where's your dalil for it being haram? Where's your evidence for it being haram? But we do that with children. That's wrong. Now go to your room. Right? So it's the communication has to go hand in hand with the consequence.
Assalamu alaikum. So the brother, this first question kind of stole my thunder. That was what I wanted to ask, but I'm kind of keying off of that. And you know, as parents, maybe we didn't experience this in our upbringing, right? But we understand the value on like an intellectual level. This makes sense, but we're still afraid to implement it because we look back at our own experiences and go, well, you know, I had this harsh time that scarred me, for example. Yeah. And I'm afraid that I'm going to let my kid, if he dwells on this emotion or doesn't try and suppress it, then he's going to be scarred as well. Yeah. Because that's all we know. That's all we've experienced. And that can be harder to get over than even like on an intellectual level saying, yeah, this makes sense. So do you have any recommendations for how we can get over that? Or
so you mean like the fear of continuing the cycle?
Yeah. We're implementing this because to us, emotions were just hurtful things that might have left scars later in our lives.
Yeah. So I think first I would go back to what I was said to him about being open to being vulnerable. That reduces the fear of making mistakes a little bit because, you know, if you're constantly fearing that you're going to make mistakes, you're going to make other mistakes while you're unaware. You know what I mean? Because you're so, like, for example, if you had a certain experience with one of your parents, your whole life you're like, I just don't want to be like that, right? But then you're so fearful of being like that you're not, because the fear is just so overwhelming that you're not actually aware of other things that you're doing that could be detrimental. So fear often blocks us from seeing the truth and being able to go with the flow and being able to actually maximize our present, right? So kind of letting yourself know that, I am an imperfect parent, and that's going to happen, right? As long as the one thing that I'm going to do right, though, is that I'm going to always hold myself into account in front of Allah and actually be honest with myself about what I'm doing. But you're never going to reach a place where you're going to not make a mistake with your child, right? And there's no parent on the face of the earth who has not made mistakes. But the goal is that you want to grow from your mistakes. A lot of the biggest mistake that a parent can do is that they deny making mistakes. So when a child goes to them and say, well, you hurt me or you made this mistake. No, I didn't. This is just the way this is the way I'm parenting you. Your job is to listen. That's the worst kind of attitude, right? But we're not trying to do that. We know we're going to make mistakes, but we're open to growing from our mistakes, and we're open to changing our ways. You might raise your kids a certain way for 5 years and realize that way never worked. And you might learn and come to things like this, and you might learn new ways, and you might say, you know what, let's try this way. You're always going to be changing. But to hold yourself in this to standard where you have to be, perfect is actually going to, number one, might make you even resentful down the road, because you might be like, I tried everything, I did my best, because you feared yourself into being perfect, quote unquote, that when it doesn't work, you're going to be like so agitated, But just be open that you are going to make mistakes, but you're going to tell yourself and you're going to ask Allah to help you to be accountable and try your best to improve upon them, But there's no way that you're not going to. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it does. All I wanted to, it does. Basically, it's hard for you to see something, I guess, that you haven't experienced yourself. You're afraid that if there's a bad experience and your child's upset at something, you want to quickly quash that emotion because when you were in his position, nobody had that emotional intelligence to tell you that's a good emotion and let's make a positive out of it.
Yeah.
So your instincts are saying, let me quickly quash this, whereas you shouldn't be based on what you're learning and what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, and also sometimes the reason we get like that too is because okay, so we have this idea of what we don't want to be like, right? And so then we see a parent sees a child feeling a negative emotion towards them, right? Then they remember, oh my God, they're mad at me, they're upset with me, I'm going to be just like what I don't want to be like, right? So how can I help them feel better? Because I don't want to be like that, so I got to make you feel better so I could feel better about myself, right? And so that's but to understand that, just because they're feeling a certain way towards you does not make you the parent that you fear being. Do you know what I mean? It's its own unique situation on its own. And just one more thing, a lot of the parents who grew up in authoritarian households, which we said is the opposite extreme, high control, demand, and structure, and low affection. When they become parents, they don't want to be like that, so they become permissive, which is highly affection, low demand. But that's not helpful either. So again, always remember that balance between both. Yeah.
I want to share this. 2 weeks ago, something really traumatic happened in my family, and I'm sharing this because it's very relevant. Unfortunately, my kids, part of them witnessed it. And my husband and I, we both had different. I wanted to be able to talk to them about it and let them feel it, because I believe that gives you empathy.
Yeah.
And I believe in our communities there's a lot of apathy because the way feelings are wishing away. Oh, they're crazy. Oh, look, they have cancer. They're crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody died. Don't cry. Oh, somebody, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You obviously know anybody who's been raised in our culture. I don't want to blame it on Islam. I'm going to say our culture, regardless of where we're from. We all kind of have similar cultures. So I noticed that was a really bad thing. But at the time, my husband's a little more powerful than me. We kind of went along with what he wanted. And I took him on the side and I said, "It's unacceptable. You see something like this, a person is hurting. You check on them. You feel for them. It's okay to feel.
Yeah.
It's okay to feel." So what I'm saying is also parents, sometimes we have to be in line with that. And I have one of my children, out of the 3, that has a little bit of apathy, and I think it comes from the fact that his father is always telling him, "You can't cry."
And he's a boy, so
yes,
yeah.
Don't cry. And I'm against that because I believe the men in our culture, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to assault the men in our culture, but a lot of them are kind of most of them, but a lot are sort of apathetic to women's emotions or what they go through with their children or certain things that happen in our community because they're taught don't feel, you're a man is not supposed to feel. So along with that not feeling comes with lack of sensitivity for others that feel. So I would advise the men and the women, when things happen in the family, let the children feel, let them talk about it. It's okay because they get so embarrassed by what happened in the family or this bad event that right away he took them shopping and let me deal with whatever I I felt it was a very bad thing to do, but you know,
Yeah.
it is what it is. We parent together.
Right.
So please, I advise you fathers and mothers, let let your children feel.
Yeah.
Because this is why the world is the way it is. Whether in our religion or our cultures, it's because people were not allowed to feel. We're not allowed
Yeah.
to have opinions. We're not allowed to have emotions. So
Right.
what happens is you put that inside, and that creates anger, apathy, and resentment.
Yeah. We have a fear of like experiencing emotions for sure, definitely. Oh. Oh, okay.
Miss Marwa will be with our youth at 11:15. So inshallah, this is the last question.
I just wanted to mention that this is extremely beneficial, and there's a parenting book that goes completely in line with what you're talking about, and it's called Peaceful Parenting.
Oh, I
It's
think
by
I heard of
Laura
that.
Markham.
Mhm.
She's also a psychologist, and she speaks to like the punishment and all that other stuff. And in her, like, the thing that really hooked me to it was the first thing that she said was that as parents you make mistakes,
Yeah.
and it's okay to make mistakes. So all the stuff that you talked about, it totally like that book really speaks to like what you're talking about. So it really goes hand in hand in what you're
Okay.
saying. So
So that's a
like,
suggestion for a book to
I
check
would
out.
highly
Yeah.
recommend that book, and she also has a website that's called ahaparenting.com.
Okay.
So if you guys
So
have
Peaceful
questions,
Parenting by Laura Markham, right?
Laura Markham.
Yeah, Laura Markham. Thank you. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakum Allahu khairan for being with us this morning. Really
Okay.
interesting.
Okay. Thank you so
talk.
much for your time. Jazakallah
And I
khair.
do have to say that this session was the loudest session with the kids, and it's fine. What I'm trying to say is, kids will be themselves. Really.
This is what we learned today.
We shape them into who they are later on. They soothed themselves, all the kids. They were crying, they soothed themselves. Some of them took a nap, some of them played. And we just need to make sure that our kids, when they get a little bit older, we allow them to do the same, and we don't just mute them. It's very important for us to work on ourselves and our emotions, our own upbringing, and see what worked and see what didn't work, and it's okay. This morning I was driving and I told my mom about the subject, and she said, oh, here we go again, you and emotions. Then she hung up, then she called again and she said, Iman, I know that's what you wanted growing up, and I didn't know how to do it. I said, it's okay, Mama, it's all good. I learned it on my own, it's all
See,
good.
that's
I have two boys, 13 and 15, two separate boys. You won't believe that they came from the same stomach. Every kid is different.
Yeah.
Find their language. Find the way they respond to you. Find the way they express themselves, and work with that. I want to thank you for being with us.
thank you.
We will have 2 more sessions before our graduations. We have this once a month. Next week, actually, we have a special program here at IOK. A group of young scholars are putting together a conference, free conference, about Sharia, and it's open for everyone, Muslim, non-Muslim. One of our speakers is here, Sheikha Alia. She will be here with us, and she will be exploring this subject with us. Please do come. It's from 10:30 to 4:30. Jazakumullahu khair. Thank you so much.
Jazakallah khair.
You have a great job.
Oh, let me get up.
To go. You did an amazing
Thank
job.
you.
Mashallah alayk.
Thank
You're gonna
you.
do great.
Thank you so much.
Please email her some of those.
I will, yes, definitely, for sure.